Back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is for educational purpose only. This is the case of the Idaho 4. This was a clip that I made over a year ago. I'm using it under fair use purpose. Tommy Jude, one of my favorite creators who's worked hard in this case, took an interview with Cyree and Cyree is beautiful wife. It was a very interesting interview and we got to ask some questions. Mental Health and Crime Channel. My name is Huda London. I'm a licensed cognitive behavior therapist. That's a CBT therapist and a licensed mental health counselor. I'd like to start by thanking all my subscribers, my viewers, for all their support, interesting, kind, mindful comments, and that the passion we have to getting justice, to trying and getting justice for these important cases. Today, I'd like to go back and talk about the Idaho quadruple murders. But I would always like to start by giving my deepest condolence to the families of the 4 precious victims. I would love to thank Once Upon a Crime Time, Tommy Jude, for being so kind, supportive to many other creators out there. I love his mods, the excellent mods, love his chat, and I love Tommy Jude because he's a very kind-hearted human being. He has that passion of trying to get justice, just like we all do. I believe 2 days ago, I was on Tommy Jude's channel. He had 2 guests that are extremely professionals. They have law enforcement background. We've all heard of Cyree and his beautiful wife, Carrie. Cyree was an expert witness in the forensic towers of the case of Brian Christopher Kohlberger and the 4 victims who lost their life in the most horrific manner. So when I went into the chat, I got to learn a lot about Cyree. I've seen him on other panels with Lana and other people, and he's extremely a professional in what he does. He has 20 years law and enforcement background. He was a detective for the SWAT team. He worked 20 years with them. And he's worked in Afghanistan with law enforcement as an undercover. He does have a lot of really knowledgeable things to say. I believe I've learned a lot from both Carrie and Sai. I wanted to show you all a bit of the questions that actually I asked. I believe it was 3 questions. The reason I wouldn't go into all of the questions is because this is for fair use purpose, and I don't think it'll be fair to Tommy Jude. He did this exclusive interview with Cyree and Carrie. We were not obviously allowed to ask questions related to the Idaho Moscow, but my subscribers know me. I'm just a question mark. I always love asking questions. I do speculate a bit. Most of us do try to stick to the facts. But I love to ask questions. You'll have seen all my clips and I'm always asking the whys. The reason I love to ask questions is because by asking questions, you're not directly accusing anyone of anything. I'm just trying to use the psychological way, I personally believe, of helping people to think along with me, to think for themselves. I don't want to lead people into my thoughts and my directions and my views. We are supposed to follow the facts, but the question is, what are the facts in a case that is so mysterious? There's so many loopholes in this case, and I personally believe that this case happened on the 13th of November 2022. The surviving roommates did not call law enforcement. They called 911 8 hours after the quadruples, but they didn't even decide to call 911 first. They called Hunter Johnson, who's E's best friend. So they called him before law enforcement even. So I am trying to figure out what could have happened in that 8 hours. As a licensed mental health counselor, I do try and be mindful of speculating of the surviving roommates, but it's a question mark everyone has. Obviously, we are not them. Luckily, we haven't been into a situation like that, and my heart goes out to them, honestly. Having a quadruple happen in a house where you were either sleeping, texting, whether you were present or not, is just a trigger itself. So we don't know what they've seen. The court hasn't started. The court is going to Cy, Ray, and Kerry are really professional in what they do. He has a background in law enforcement, the SWAT team, undercover in Afghanistan. He has this company called ZX, I believe. And it is really, I'm really satisfied that I could ask those questions, and I really wanted to thank them for taking my questions and for giving me a straightforward answer. So let's go to some of the questions. Like I said, I'm using this under fair use purpose. Tommy, I hope you don't mind that I'm using these questions in my channel, because I wanted to share it with my subscribers and viewers. I really believe you did an excellent show. You have so much passion, and I really thank you for giving us a fair chance to ask these questions. Thank you.
About SWAT, there's a couple of questions I saw.
Yeah, well, let's go look at some of these. I bet you leave questions in caps if you would, okay? I think that would.
It was when does the SWAT team typically get deployed? I think that was the question. Correct me.
From Huda, and Huda's got her own channel too. Says hello, Tom. It's your Carrie, and say I have a question, if you can answer. When does law enforcement use the service of the SWAT team? In which cases? Thank you.
So that's, what a lot of people don't realize is SWAT is used to reduce liability. And I know a lot of people immediately would think there's no way SWAT teams reduce liability. But
sometimes they're a huge liability.
Yeah, it can be a really big liability. I'm not going to lie, I burned a house down once on Christmas Eve.
That's a different story.
Oh, jeez. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a history here.
We have to know when the right time there is.
That's going to be our Christmas episode. But to answer your question there has to be a level of violence in which there's a concern that either somebody is going to get hurt by a suspect that is contained in a house or an area, or a level of violence in which there's a concern that either somebody is going to get hurt by a suspect that is contained in a house or an area, or if regular patrol officers just show up to this, they're not going to be properly equipped, and maybe they don't have all the proper training to manage that in a safe and effective manner. And I will tell you, a SWAT team is a great deterrent for violent criminals to become violent. You know, when you see one or two officers walking to your front door, maybe you do pull out the gun and start shooting. When you see an entire SWAT team coming to the front door, maybe all of a sudden you start to second guess, these guys look like they might be ready for me. So anytime law enforcement has information that somebody typically is armed, and they can be armed with any type of weapon, there's probably a large likelihood that they're going, I used my thumb. There's a large likelihood that they're going to use that weapon, and they've shown some type of propensity to enact violence. And that's typically what it calls for. And I can't remember where it was. There was just a big case back east where a bunch of officers served a search warrant. And it was kind of hodgepodge together, but I want to say 3 of the officers were killed and maybe a 4th was shot. And that is a perfect example of, if that would have been a SWAT team with the proper training, the proper equipment, that probably would have been avoided. And you know, when you look at a lot of the accidental shootings, entries that go wrong, typically it's not the actual trained SWAT team, it's a hodgepodge of a bunch of officers they put together at the last minute to go serve a search warrant. And that's what I'm saying, typically, in a proper scenario with the proper training, it reduces liability because it gives law enforcement a better ability to control those situations. But that's most of them.
So you can see clearly the reason that I asked about the SWAT team was, since I told you we're not allowed to ask directly about the case, but my questions was, I was going around the world basically just to find out what Cyril thinks about the SWAT team. And he has experience with the SWAT team, 20 years experience, so he would know. The reason I asked about the SWAT team was because of Brent Kopaka being in this case. We have all heard of Brent Kopaka. He could be related in the Idaho Moscow case, or he could be totally innocent and has nothing to do with this case. We don't know anything about this case since it's on a gag order, but it was quite mysterious that Brent Kopaka had 2 of his roommates as hostage. He lives only 7 minutes away from Brian Christopher Kohberger, which is quite interesting. There's a lot of speculations going on social media about Brent Kopaka, if he's related to this case or not. What I find strange is that Brent Kopaka, we all know, is a Purple Heart military man. So I'm sure he served his country, and he's no longer here with us. May God rest his soul. So I'm not going to go into anything or Brent Kopaka, but I just wanted to know why the SWAT team and when are the SWAT team called. What I found interesting was it took 8 hours for the SWAT team to take Brent Kopaka down. So you can just imagine how much experience he has with weapons. And I just feel really sorry for the Brent Kopaka case, because this is actually a very sad, touchy subject, because I ain't from the States. Like I say, I've always said, who'd in London? I live in London, I have nothing to do with the States, but I do research a lot about the States, and I know that there's a lot of situations where these veterans come back home and they do not get the mental health help they need. Obviously, these are people who've been through every part of the war. So they have PTSD, they could be suffering definitely of PTSD, anxiety, and such things. And I just wish that Brent Kopaka got help when they could have given him help before. The reason I say that is, a couple of months ago, the body cam was released of Brent Kopaka, and it was so heartbreaking to see when the female cop came to his corridor, he was actually pointing to the floor, and he kept on saying, I can see lights, I can see things, and that is actually a serious sign of schizophrenia. He could have been suffering of schizophrenia or something in that department. Brent Kopaka could have had a psychosis episode, but he still did not get the help he needed. For him to have taken 2 roommates as hostages is a serious question that needs to be answered. Why would he have done that 3 weeks after the quadruples happened? There was rumors going around, and this is just rumors, that he held those 2 roommates as hostage because they knew that he was involved in the quadruples. It's quite strange that Brian Christopher Koberger was stopped in Indiana twice on his way to Pennsylvania. That was the same day the SWAT team took Kopaka down. And his father mentioned that. I just wonder if BK and Kopaka knew each other. I wonder if Brent Kopaka and BK could have been dealing or buying drugs, honestly, from one of the surviving roommates, BF. The reason I say that is after seeing her Venmo and knowing what she was doing in her Venmo, allegedly, it brings some serious questions. Was Brent Kopaka in that house before? Brent Kopaka is a professional. He knows how to use K-bar knives. That's what the military people do. Could BK have lent him his knife? Or was it the other way around? I find it interesting. Giglio, Brady Giglio, orders, and exculpatory evidence, which I find really interesting. So I'll just come back to it.
As far as pro bono, it's not.
What is that?
And
I bet.
a lot of when we had ZX, we would only charge like very, very minimal. Actually, it started pro bono with ZX because we had to get our product out there. We had to show that it was useful in court, that we had to show that it could meet scientific standards in court. So I was going and testifying merely to show the credibility of the product and the methodologies. So he would do it for free. After a while, we started getting so many that it became necessary to charge while we owned ZX because we wouldn't have been able to keep up as a company with the demands of the money that it took for travel, for airline. Sometimes I was there for 3 or 4 days at a time, and we weren't getting other work done that we needed to get done when we needed a training class or something like that, right? We also had a lot of employees that we had to pay. So after we were purchased, so I worked for LexisNexis. We both worked for LexisNexis, but LexisNexis didn't really have a billing system for testimony.
They didn't know how to charge for it. They couldn't create an invoice.
So I just went and testified for free for everybody. LexisNexis was so that was because they didn't know how to bill for it. I doubt they know how to bill for it right now. But he doesn't work at LexisNexis anymore. But since we've left LexisNexis, there have been very few cases that we've had to testify on.
So another one from Huda. Huda, as far as exculpatory evidence, Brady Giglio, great question. And of course, I'm not going to reference any case in this particular decade. Let's go back to a case that I worked, a really high-profile case years ago. Doug and Faylene Grant, Grant. Every documentary out there has done this piece. 20/20, 48 Hours, Dateline, Oxygen, they've all done it. In that case, there's a pill bottle that was really, really important because it's an overdose where the wife is drowned in a bathtub. We believe the husband drowned the wife. He possibly drugged her first. This pill bottle that we think he used to sedate her was never seized. And it was a mistake that was made on scene by some of the original responding officers. There's nothing we can do about it. We lost it. And we should have preserved it. We should have saved it. In that particular case, the defense made a big issue out of, hey, if they would have preserved this, they would not have found my client, the defendant's fingerprints on it. It only would have been his wife's. And it would have shown that he didn't give her these pills. Well, because we didn't preserve it, we failed to preserve evidence that potentially was exculpatory. We got, in Arizona, it's called Willits. but we get a Willits order, and the jury is instructed, hey, just so you guys know, they didn't seize this pill bottle. If they would have seized it, you have to assume it would not have had the defendant's fingerprints on it. So typically when we look at Brady or Giglio, it's a couple different things that happen. Brady is more on an officer's credibility, where we start to see an officer who maybe intentionally destroyed, lied, hid, covered up with intent. And what happens there is there's an order that comes out that they're no longer reliable. They can't testify. They're not allowed to provide testimony to a jury. Giglio will get back similar things, but now we can start to get into other issues. So, for example, let's use, I had a case with a casino. This casino has like 162 cameras. There's a attempted murder that happens in the casino, and they don't seize the video cameras. They don't seize any video. When that goes to court, there's no one that's going to be able to say that that video is not exculpatory. So how do you deal with that in court? And typically when you get to the Brady Giglio issue of this, it's the court taking some type of ruling to mitigate, to remedy this error that law enforcement made. If it's not intentional, the officers can still testify because, hey, they just screwed up. Maybe they just weren't thinking. But the jury will typically be instructed to assume certain things in looking at this case, and you'll get that in the jury instructions. So when the case is fully presented and the jury gets ready to go back to deliberate, the judge will read their jury instructions, and typically those type of things will be in the jury instruction, where the judge will tell the jury, you have to assume if they found the video, it would not show the defendant doing anything illegal. And that's how they remedy or mitigate law enforcement's mess up there, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Good question, good answer.
Okay, so let's go back to the two questions that I asked. It was in two parts, part A and part B. Like you all know me, I love to ask questions because I believe that's how you learn, especially by asking the people who are trained in this field, by asking. The reason that I'm asking these two questions is because, like I said, we can't ask directly the questions since Cy is involved in the Brent Kopaka case. He was a witness for the defense attorney and Taylor. Let's start with the exculpatory evidence. We all who have been following this case know definitely that Brent Kopaka, BK, his lawyer, attorney, was very interested in interviewing Bethany Funk, one of the surviving roommates, because BK said from the beginning that Bethany Funk has exculpatory evidence. I wonder what exculpatory evidence that she had. It could be anything. Maybe she saw the real people involved in this case, the people who did harm to the victims. Since she lives in the first floor, maybe BK knows that she saw who was coming out of the doors. Or maybe BK knows Bethany Funk personally. This was a party house, or more like a party venue. Many people had the front door key, the front door code. So Bethany Funk could have exculpatory evidence. Another thing, let's not forget, Bethany Funk was allegedly in the Sigma Chi fraternity party that night. And that is where the couple was, E and Xana. So she could have known exactly. There was rumors and speculations that there was a fight at the party with the Davids and with E. And if there was any fight that happened, and if Bethany Funk was at the party, there could have been a reason of exculpatory evidence. Now let's go to the Brady Giglio order. The reason I asked Cy, and I really thank Cy, Carrie, and especially Tommy Jude for giving me a chance in asking these questions on his channel, Once Upon a Crime Time. Please like, share, and subscribe. I love Tommy Jude because he's really very, very supportive to all the YouTube creators. which is really helpful. And I wish that other creators could have been supportive to him too. He gives everyone a fair and safe place to talk in his channel. The second part was the Brady Giglio. The Brady Giglio, I believe, came out in the 1970s. It was about a case. I can barely remember it now. I remember reading about it a long time. I think it was about some material that wasn't put in the court case while the officer was handling the case, something like that. And we have the expert, Sai, who explained it better to us, what it is. And it's usually, if there's an officer in any case that can't be trusted for whatever reason, covering up evidence or lying about a case, and he has if the example has a history for that, it doesn't have to be in the particular case, like just say like the BK case example. It could be have been in another case that the officer lied about. Then that goes into Brady Giglio. Now the reason I asked that question is because in the beginning of this